We begin the broadcast with tragic news. India has lost our first Chief of Defence Staff, General Bipin Rawat, his wife Madhulika Rawat, and 11 soldiers and officers of the Indian Army. There is one survivor. India is still coming to terms with the death of its senior-most military commander, the single-point military advisor to the government. 11 others have succumbed to their injuries in this horrific Mi-17 V5 helicopter crash. Now, the Chief of Defence Staff and the entourage was on their way to the Defence Services Staff College at Wellington, Ooty, when the Mi-17 V5 military helicopter crashed in Coonoor. This is how the tragedy unfolded earlier today.
9 a.m. An Indian Air Force Embraer aircraft carrying at least 9 people took off from Delhi for Sulur. 14 people were on board. That included CDS Gen Bipin Rawat, his wife Madhulika Rawat, Brigadier Ellis Liddar, Lieutenant Colonel Harjinder Singh, Nayak Gursevak Singh, Nayak Jitendra Kumar, Lance Nayak Vivek Kumar, Lance Nayak B. Sai Teja, and Havaldar Satpal. 11:35 a.m. The chopper made a stopover at Sulur IAF Station in Tamil Nadu. 11:45 a.m. The Mi-17 V5 chopper took off for its next and final destination in Wellington, Coonoor. 12:20 p.m. The Mi-17 chopper crashed into a gorge in the jungles close to a tribal settlement near Kateri, 7 kilometers away from Coonoor and 10 kilometers away from Defence Service Staff College in Wellington. 1:40 p.m. News of the Indian Air Force helicopter crash carrying Army Chief General Bipin Rawat broke. The chopper was found in smithereens along the foggy hills of Coonoor in Nilgiris, Tamil Nadu. 1:45 p.m. 3 people with severe burn injuries were rescued by locals and taken to the hospital at Wellington Cantonment in Nilgiris district for treatment. 1:53 p.m. The Indian Air Force puts out a tweet confirming the Army chopper was carrying CDS Bipin Rawat had crashed. An inquiry was immediately ordered to ascertain the cause of incident.
Plane helicopter அப்படி வந்துச்சு ஒரே சவுண்ட் கருகுமுன்னு சவுண்ட் வந்தோடனே கீழே ஒரு மரத்தில் அடிபட்டு வரையிலேயே நெருப்புல வந்தோடனே இங்கே ஒரு பெரிய மரம் இருக்கு அந்த மரத்தில் வந்து அடிபட்டோன்னே கீழே அப்படியே தட்டார்னு விழுந்தோடனே புகை வந்தோடனே ஒரே தீ.
2:11 p.m. It was hard for rescue and relief teams to access the accident spot. With help of local tribals, the army managed to reach the forest area. Charred bodies were recovered from the crash site. 2:30 p.m. At least 6 ambulance teams with 12 members each were rushed to the crash site. Out of 14 passengers, 13 were confirmed dead.
அப்புறம் அங்கேருந்து கிளம்பி விரைவாக வந்துட்டோம். மூமெண்ட்லேயே நாங்கள் இருந்தோம். ஸ்பாட்டில் டப்புன்னு அங்கேருந்து ஓடி வந்து இங்கே இடையில வந்துட்டு எங்களுக்கு 5-6 வண்டி வராது வழியில் ஒரு காட்டுக்குள்ளே இருக்குது நடந்து வந்தோம். ஒரு 2 கிலோமீட்டர் நடந்து வந்தோம். வந்து விரைவாக வந்து செயல்படுறதுனால 2 பேரும் நாங்கள் காப்பாற்றினோம். ஆனால் இப்போ எப்படி இருக்காங்கன்னு தெரில. ஒருத்தர் வந்து 90% தீக்காயும் இன்னொருத்தர் வந்து 45%.
3:30 p.m. In Delhi, the Defence Minister briefed the Prime Minister on the crash. The situation was being monitored closely. Later, Rajnath Singh and Army Chief General M.M. Naravane visited General Bipin Rawat's residence in Delhi.
Defence Minister, as he gets down the car, a strict security cordon is being maintained right here outside the residence to ensure that there is no chaos.
As hours passed, hope began to fade. At 6 p.m., the Indian Air Force officially announced General Bipin Rawat, Mrs. Madhulika Rawat, and 11 other persons on board died in the unfortunate accident. Bureau Report, India Today.
Son of a Lieutenant General of the Indian Army, General Bipin Rawat thought and acted India first. He was a Sword of Honour awardee at the Indian Military Academy, Dehradun. He dedicated more than 4 decades of his life to the army and to the nation. Grit, determination, never say die spirit and diligence were in his blood. General Bipin Rawat was amongst India's tallest military generals. He was appointed the first Chief of Defence Staff in 2019, a post created for better coordination between the Army, Navy and Air Force and to offer single point military advice to the government. And his main aim was to achieve synergy and create theatre commands to keep India first.
Vast experience in high-altitude warfare. An expert in counter-insurgency operations. He dedicated 43 years of his life to his motherland. General Bipin Rawat was among India's tallest defence chiefs. An alumnus of the National Defence Academy and the Indian Military Academy, General Rawat was commissioned into the 5th Battalion of 11 Gorkha Rifles of the Indian Army in December 1978. But General Rawat learnt his first lessons in defending his country much earlier, from none other than his father, Lieutenant General Lakshman Singh Rawat, who had served in the same unit, 11 Gorkha Rifles. During the 4-decade-long service, General Bipin Rawat held multiple positions. General Rawat was also part of a United Nations peacekeeping force. His tenure as Deputy Chief of Army saw the Indian Army launch surgical strikes on terror launch pads deep inside the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir.
These surgical strikes were a message that we had communicated, and that if required, and if the adversary does not behave, then if we have to continue with these kind of activities and events, we will continue. But there are other ways of doing these things also. It did not take the same form.
General Rawat was the 4th officer from the Gorkha Rifles to become the Chief of Army Staff on 31st December 2016. 3 years later, in 2019, General Bipin Rawat was appointed as India's first Chief of Defence Staff. The post, which was recommended after the Kargil War for better coordination between the Army, Navy and Air Force.
तीनों सर्विसेज जो हैं, उसका 1+1+1 का जो जोड़ आता है, उसको 3 नहीं बनाना है, उसको 5 या 7 बनाना है. तो you have to achieve more through synergy and integration. ये मकसद है जो CDS को जिस तरह से टास्क दिया गया है.
During his service, General Rawat has been decorated with multiple medals for his grit and valor. It included the Param Vishisht Seva Medal, Uttam Yudh Seva Medal, Ati Vishisht Seva Medal, Vishisht Seva Medal and Sena Medal. General Bipin Rawat's death.
India's first Chief of Defence Staff, General Bipin Rawat, served in the army for over 4 decades. He was the brain behind many bold moves that the Indian Armed Forces took, confronting not just terrorism, but also terror supporters across the line of control and in sending a very clear message across the line of actual control. Here is a message on what General Bipin Rawat's legacy means for the armed forces.
September 29th, 2016. India climbs up the escalation ladder in the war on terror. The special forces of the Indian Army went across the line of control deep into Pakistan-occupied Kashmir in the early hours and launched an attack on terrorist launch pads. The surgical strike in response to the terror strike Coonoor stunned the world. It began a new chapter in India's security paradigm. And among the few people instrumental in the mission was General Bipin Rawat, then the Deputy Army Chief. Since then, General Rawat has made no bones about the fact that the Indian Army can go to any extent in protecting the borders.
हमारी जो सेना है, हम अमन और शांति चाहते हैं, लेकिन अमन और शांति का मकसद ये नहीं है कि हम कमजोर हैं। अगर जरूरत आई तो हम किसी भी तरह से ताकत इस्तेमाल करने में पीछे नहीं हटेंगे।
The surgical strikes laid the foundation for another retaliation 3 years later. The Indian Air Force flew deep inside Pakistani territory to bomb Jaish-e-Mohammed terror camps in Balakot. General Bipin Rawat, then the Chief of Army Staff, had his forces on high alert, ready from any blowback by the enemy. The Balakot bombing in retaliation to the Pulwama terror attack that killed 40 CRPF personnel jolted Pakistan and sent out clear message to the world. India will not tolerate terror. Under the leadership of General Rawat, the Indian Army has taken some of the most stringent steps against Pakistan. As the Army Chief, General Rawat stood up to Chinese PLA in Doklam Plateau on the India-Bhutan-China tri-junction in 2017. The stare-down lasted 73 days and ended with the Chinese withdrawing. General Rawat was aware of the multiple threats India faces on the border and warned that India must be ready for a two-front war in a worst-case scenario.
तीनों सर्विसेज जो हैं, उसका 1+1+1 का जो जोड़ आता है, उसको 3 नहीं बनाना है, उसको 5 या 7 बनाना है. तो you have to achieve more through synergy and integration. ये मकसद है जो CDS को जिस तरह से टास्क दिया गया है.
The 26th Army Chief played a key role in shaping the army in other matters too. He was fundamental in restructuring the army, cutting administrative flab, reducing duplicity, and increasing combat potential. The Government of India amended the army rules to extend the age of superannuation from 62 years to 65 years, paving the way for General Bipin Rawat's appointment as India's first Chief of Defence Staff. As the CDS, General Rawat ensured better coordination between the Army, Navy and Air Force. General Bipin Rawat's is an illustrious career, a legacy that is immortal and indelible. Bureau Report, India Today.
General Bipin Rawat was very clear-headed. He called a spade a spade. He never shied away from either making bold statements or calling out Pakistan's hypocrisy on state-sponsored terror or telling the country that it was China that had to be dealt with in a very firm manner, that it was China that actually was a threat to India. General Bipin Rawat also was the architect of that cross-border raid and reassuring the government that India will emerge on top of any situation, whether it was a cross-border raid to deal with terrorists in the northeast or to send a very strong message to Pakistan along the line of control or to deal with the situation post Article 370.
A tall leader, a counter-insurgency expert and a fiery personality. Chief of Defence Staff General Bipin Singh Rawat never minced words when it came to India's hostile neighbours. From the day he took over as the Chief of Army, General Rawat made it known India was capable of countering any threat.
हमारी जो सेना है, हम अमन और शांति चाहते हैं, लेकिन अमन और शांति का मकसद ये नहीं है कि हम कमजोर हैं. हम हर तरफ से काबिल हैं, ताकतवर हैं और अगर जरूरत आई तो हम किसी भी तरह से ताकत इस्तेमाल करने में पीछे नहीं हटेगी.
Taking over as the Chief of Army Staff at a time when Chinese incursions were becoming more frequent, General Rawat did not hold back from voicing the Indian Army's decades-old demand for new weaponry.
People who are deeply committed into the conduct of counter-proxy, counter-terrorism, counter-insurgencies are empowered and enabled. The soldier on the ground, the person with the boots on the ground, has to be provided weapons that give him the lethality to take action.
The most testing time for General Rawat was Doklam standoff at India's tri-junction border with Bhutan and China.
Our troops on the border should not feel that it cannot happen again or it cannot happen in another sector again. So what I was trying to say is that it is always better to remain prepared and alert than think that these things will not happen. So my message to my people is that remain prepared, it can happen again.
The incident solidified General Rawat's belief that China and not Pakistan was India's biggest security threat in the region. Something he reiterated during his stint as India's first Chief of Defence Staff.
We have our border management protocols which have been signed between us and China right from 1993 onwards, and we have modified the protocols continuously. But of late we have been seeing some aggressive actions by the Chinese, but we are capable of handling these in the best suitable way. We have our tri-services, that is the Army, Navy and Air Force, capable of dealing with our threats along our frontiers.
General Rawat called a spade when it came to Pakistan's duplicity on terror.
These surgical strikes were a message that we had communicated, and that if required and if the adversary does not behave, then if we have to continue with these kind of activities and events, we will continue. But there are other ways of doing these things also. It did not take the same form.
He also proclaimed that the influx of Bangladeshi migration was not total arbitrary, but a partial result of Pakistan's proxy warfare.
A planned immigration that is taking place because of our western neighbor. They will always try and ensure that this area is taken over through playing the proxy dimension of warfare. You don't have to confront a stronger nation through conventional operations. So you play a proxy game.
A general who spoke his mind. General Rawat quoted some controversies, but gave the forces a new direction.
The Chief of Defence Staff, General Bipin Rawat, was on board a Mi-17 V5 medium-lift transport helicopter of the Indian Air Force. Now, this is, according to Indian Air Force experts, an advanced military transport helicopter that has been with the Indian Air Force since 2012. India got these helicopters for strengthening its chopper fleet, especially for high-altitude areas. Now, this was thought about post-Kargil. Of course, these helicopters came in. They've got souped-up engines. They've got advanced avionics, a glass cockpit, very sturdy helicopters. And these helicopters are being used extensively, whether at the line of control, line of actual control, Siachen Glacier, or the Northeast, or even for humanitarian aid and disaster relief operations.
Chief of Defence Staff General Bipin Rawat, his wife Madhulika Rawat, and 11 others lose their lives as an Indian Air Force Mi-17 V5 helicopter crashes in Coonoor. Only Group Captain Varun Singh survived the crash. Sources tell India Today, Wing Commander Prithvi Singh Chauhan was flying the advanced military transport chopper. He was commanding officer of the 109 helicopter unit. Mi-17 V5 choppers joined the Indian Air Force fleet in February 2012 after India expanded its 2008 contract with Russia for strengthening its chopper operations. The Indian Air Force currently has over 200 Mi-17 V5 helicopters in service. Manufactured by Russian company Kazan, the advanced helicopter comes with a weather radar and latest generation night vision devices, which makes it fit for high altitude operations. It can carry a maximum weight of 13,000 kilos with an additional payload weight of 4,000 kilos. The helicopter is equipped with self-defense system against heat-seeker missiles and heavily armored cockpit. The self-sealed fuel tanks are filled with foam, polyurethane and are protected against explosions. It is the most technically advanced helicopter of Mi-8 family of helicopters and is fitted with advanced TV3 117 VM engines. The military transport helicopter has been involved in crashes earlier too. In 2017, 7 people died as a Mi-17 V5 chopper crashed near Tawang in Arunachal Pradesh. 4 years earlier in 2013, 20 people died in a chopper crash in Uttarakhand during a rescue mission during flash floods. Bureau Report, India Today.
What are 5 virtues of a soldier? What does it take to become a soldier of the Indian Army? Chief of Defence Staff General Bipin Rawat on Agenda Aaj Tak spoke of Naam, Namak, Nishan. What else? Take a look.
कोई भी नौजवान जब अपनी प्रशिक्षण के लिए अपने ट्रेनिंग सेंटर में जाता है रिक्रूट बनकर, बाद में भारतीय सेना में तैनात होने के लिए, किस तरह के विचार उसके इंस्ट्रक्टर, उसके प्रशिक्षक उसको ध्यान देने में बार बार उसके दिमाग में ये गढ़ते रहते हैं कि ये विचारधारा सदा आप अपने साथ लेकर चलेंगे। और इस विचारधारा को मैं सिर्फ 5 शब्दों में दोहराना चाहूँगा, और वो है, हर एक जवान को ये सिखलाई दी जाती है कि आप जिस भी कार्य को करने जा रहे हैं, आपने इन 5 शब्दों को ध्यान में रखना है, और वो है नाम, नमक, निशान, वफादारी और इज़्ज़त। तो इन 5 शब्दों पर, इन 5 तत्वों पर एक सैनिक की नींव जड़ी जाती है। ये 5 शब्द इतनी गहराई से उसके दिमाग में बैठा दिए जाते हैं कि जब भी उसे किसी कर्तव्य का पालन करता होता है, इन तत्वों को ध्यान में रखते हुए उसे आगे चलते रहना होता है। और जब तक भारतवर्ष के सैनिक इन 5 शब्दों का अमल करते रहेंगे, तब तक मैं यकीन के साथ कह सकता हूं कि भारतीय सेना को के ऊपर अगर कोई बुरी नज़र डालेगा तो उसका नष्ट कर दिया जाएगा।
General Bipin Rawat was a man on a mission, and his mission was to achieve what Prime Minister Narendra Modi had tasked the armed forces to achieve: theatre commands. How difficult was the road? I spoke to him about it, and that exclusive interview to India Today coming up next.